Alright, now that you've completed inking your advanced static pose as well as inking the standing pose, let's go ahead and start moving forward with learning how to draw apparel. Take out your handout. This is the Drape Flow page 1 that has all the different skirts on here and a couple different tops. And also you're going to want to have your number 2 pencil, a 2H pencil, detail eraser, your regular plastic eraser, a ruler, as well as some more clean paper. Let's go ahead and start by analyzing the very first pose here. Basically, we have a girl wearing a skirt, and at first appearance it looks like her weight is evenly distributed on both feet. What's happening in this picture though is this knee is slightly bending forward and this knee is locked back. So she actually has a little bit of her weight more on this leg here. And you'll find out when we start to analyze the hem and the waistband. So you'll see inside the photo, I've already provided a plumb line here. And the plumb line is slightly favoring towards this foot because this foot has a little more weight on here. Come in here and notice where her kneecap is on this leg. And then the leg here, the kneecap is slightly higher. And we'll find the centers of them in just a minute. Come up here to the hem. Now, the hem is on a curve because when it's down below the waist, it's curving down. But you can kind of get a sense of the angle that the hem is going. So if you place your ruler here and you have an even amount from here to here and here to here, you know that you're following the angle of the hem. So let's go ahead and get that line now. And then as you come up to the waistband is also has a slight upward curve because this is right at her waist. But if you were to put the ruler at the very edge of this corner and this corner here, you'll see that it's also following that same angle as the hem. So put these in lightly. Then what we'll do is we'll double check that they're parallel. And what I would do is it's easier to gauge the one here at the waist. So if the line that you made down here at the hem is not parallel with that, go ahead and fix this line down below. Now you'll notice both of them are angling and popping to her right side. So come over here and put an R for right. And once you have these both parallel, let's go ahead and darken them in with your number 2 pencil. And then put an arrowhead here on her right side. Now what's going to be happening is down here at the centers of her knees, it's going to be following that same slight angle. So using your ruler and that line there, we can come down here to the center of her right leg. Just guess where you think it is and get that line here. And now we can find the center of the left leg. So again, let's go ahead and outline this. So her leg is coming down. That's the bone from her knee. This is her leg curving in at the knee joint. And then we have the calf muscle. So it's going to be low, bumping out here, and it's going to be high, bumping out here. Following on this knee, everything is just a little bit lower, up in this area here. So this is the bone popping out here. This is a little bit lower than that one. The leg coming in. And then the calf come down, and what we're going to do is, because this knee is bending forward, this is similar to a walking foot. So if you remember when we were analyzing the walking foot, the leg that had the weight on it, everything was normal. But the leg that the foot was lifting up off the ground, this calf here pops out a little bit higher than that one. And to show that this knee here is bending forward, let's have this calf here pop out a little bit sooner. So come down with your arrow here a little bit higher up to get this inside calf to bend a little higher here and a little bit higher there. And then what I would do for this knee to show that it's bending forward is I would emphasize this kneecap and put a little bit of a shadow in here. And that really lets you know that, hey, this leg is bending forward. And the other leg is just straight up and down. It might even be hyperflexed backwards a little bit. Now come up here to the curve of the hem. Again, anything that is down below the waist is curving down. So let's get this curve of the hem in here. And then come and get the sides of the silhouette of the skirt. Being really careful that you're following exactly what the photo is doing and don't accidentally draw something different. Now what I want you to do is on both sides of the skirt, bring in your ruler and follow this angle that it's doing here towards the bottom and extend that line down a short distance. And then do the same thing on this side. Just follow this last little bit of the side seam of the skirt. Now I want you to notice the distance from here to here is shorter than the distance from there to there. So over here, put a plus sign, and over here, put a minus sign. So now when we analyze this, we can see the hem of the skirt is popping out more to this side where the weight of her leg is. And also, so the waistband was popping to this side, the knees are popping to this side, and the distance away from her leg is larger here, smaller there. Now let's talk a little bit about the waistband here. Because this waistband is literally right on her waist, it's curving slightly upwards. So go ahead and do this with me now. Follow the waistband curving upwards. And the top edge will be doing the exact same thing. It's slightly curving upwards. Now if you remember, on the waist of our croquis, we were concave curving inwards. But when you have a straight waistband like this, the outside edges are straight lines. So be sure that you're going perfectly straight here and perfectly straight there. And what's happening is on the inside of this, her waist is curving inwards. So go ahead and put these dots in here to remind yourself that's what her skin is doing, but the waistband itself is straight there and straight here. If this skirt had a seam going down the center front, it would not be the same as this plumb line, because we need to go halfway along the waistband and find the center, and halfway along the hem and find the center as well. So let's go ahead and do that now. So here's the halfway point down at the hem of the skirt, and then taking a guess at the top and double check it, and then we can connect this. So that would be the center front of the skirt and not the plumb line. You'll also notice that the center front of the skirt is slightly going towards her right side. So this is the same as when we analyzed our walking model, and the center front of her swimsuit, again, was slightly to the right side, because this is the leg that had the weight on it. Now take out your static pose inked croquis, and what we're going to do is we're going to start drawing skirts of our own. For me, since my table is dark and I have this other paper behind here, it's a little bit distracting. So I'm going to go ahead and tape a nice clean piece of paper behind this croquis so she has a super clean white background. And then when I put a clean piece on top of that, I can see through it really easily. For drawing this, what we want to see is the waist, a little bit above the waist, and then all the way down to her knees. So on your blank paper, bring it over here, horizontally, so it's landscape. And we'll come in and we'll draw different skirts and we'll move this as we go along and we'll fill up this whole page. So bring your piece of paper over here and we'll start with this upper corner of the paper. And you'll want to give yourself a little bit of room on both sides. So here I'm looking at the edge. And then I want to come in and I want to find where is this center plumb line on this paper. And I can see it's about right there. So then using my ruler and I'm squaring up with the edge of my clean paper, I can come back to where that plumb line is. And I'll draw a very light plumb line here on my paper. And then I can use that to line up with my croquis. Now again, when I tape this down, I don't want to damage my croquis paper. So I'm going to get some lint on this by sticking it to my shirt or my chair. And then I can come in here and again, we'll get some of her waist and at least down to her knees. Now what I want to do is I'm going to come into the waist area here. So if you remember, this is her natural waist. So this skirt comes all the way up above the top of her hip bones and into the waist area. And that's where this is here. So very lightly, what I'll do is I'll start by just drawing in the waist. So that's the natural waist and the skin of my croquis. And then come down here along the side of her body. So this would be the outside of her hips on both sides. So now you have a sense of where her skin is. The skirt itself is not tight up on the skin. There's a little bit of room inside of here. That's how she's able to move and walk and sit. So when we draw this skirt, it's really important that from now on, we're always drawing outside of the body. So let's go ahead and switch over to our number 2 pencil. And we'll come up here and the waist band itself, remember, was slightly curving upwards. So let's go ahead and use right here from this top of hip bone and slightly curve upwards. And then however wide the waistband is, do the same thing here, making sure that it's curving upwards and these two lines are parallel. So now I have the curve for the waistband. When I draw the outside edges, I want to make sure I'm outside of her skin area. And also, if you remember, the outside edges of the waistband are straight up and down. So they're basically right angles to the waistband itself. Now what we want to do is we want to flow the skirt above her body, and it'll slightly be touching here around the hip area, back to that waistband, and down towards her hem. And let's do the same thing on the other side. So again, there's some space here in the waist area. It's just touching at the fullest part of her hip, but my pencil line is to the outside of her skin. And then we'll come down here for the hem. Now since this is a static pose, what we're going to do is come down and find the knee level. And then I want you to back this back upwards like 3/4 of an inch. And go ahead and draw a straight line all the way across. So she has her weight even on both feet. It's 50%, 50%. So we're going to have the same distance from here to the hem and here to the hem because neither of her hips are popping. So just double check as you come down to the hem that you're getting the same distance back to where her leg is. Now so far the hem that we drew is straight across. But remember, everything down from the waist curves down. So what we need to do is, if this is where the hem stops, it's going to curve up here and the same here. And whatever distance you do on one side, you need to do the same on the other side. So again, it's the same distance here, same distance there. Now that we have everything in its place, let's come in with our number 2 pencil and get one clean line all the way through here. Since her legs will be showing coming down below, using our number 2 pencil, let's start to get her legs going below the knee. And then come up to the waist area and let's get her waist. Now in this instance, if there was a center front, so here we put a center front seam on this skirt, this center front would go straight down with the plumb line. Just for fun, let's put a single top stitch on both sides of the seam here at center front. So remember, whatever you did on one side, make sure it's the exact same measurement to the other side. And then if we wanted to do a top stitch here along the hem, what you'll want to do is make a line that's following the same curve of the hem, and it's also the same distance following the hem, so it's parallel with the curve. So get a light line in there. I should have done mine using a lighter pencil. But now that I have that in there, I can go ahead and draw in a darker top stitch. So this kind of stitching is something you would do if this was like a canvas skirt or denim or something. It's just giving you an idea of what's going on with the construction. Now take out your standing pose, and what we'll do is we'll put a skirt on her, but something new is happening here. So her hips are popping to the left side. The hem is going to pop out here to the left side as well. So come over to where you can find basically the waists would be at about the same level, the knees would be at about the same level, and you're giving yourself some room for the hem of the skirt. And then come down in here where you can find the plumb line from your original croquis down below. And using that plumb line, we can make sure that we're drawing a clean plumb line that's also square here with the paper. So now I can line up this plumb line with my croquis. So here I have my paper is squared up with her plumb line. I have their knees in the same location, which puts their waist in the same location. Let's start again with just getting her waist and the outside of her legs. I went ahead and did the inside of her legs also, so it's easier for you to see in the video. Now what we'll do is we're going to put the waistband in the same location. So at the top of the hip bones here, we're going to do where it curves upwards. Making sure that your curve is matching her hips. So if you need to, what you can do is right where you see the top of the hip bone at her waist, you can put a dot there. And here again is the top of the hip bone at the waist. So then you know that your curve will travel up and hit that dot as it comes back down. And then let's do the same width of the waistband on this one. Now the sides of the waistband should be straight up and down according to the waistband angle. So what I would do is I would turn this paper a little bit sideways so I can see the waistband and get my sides of the waistbands straight up and down. So in a sense there's a right angle here and here and there's a right angle here and here. Now for this one, the hem is going to be at an angle also, and the skirt is going to pop over here more. So if you remember on this skirt, there's a little more weight on this leg here, so it was popping a little bit further off of her leg to that side. Well, for this croquis, it's going to do the opposite. So the skirt is going to pop here further away from this leg and closer to this leg. So let's go ahead and get the hem of the skirt first. What we can do is we can measure how far up we came from the knees and come over here to her knee where it's the one that's supporting the weight. And let's go that same distance. So for instance, I did about 3/4 of an inch. And then we want this hem to follow the same angles. So you need to see where her full hip is and where her knees are. So then we can come in and get the same angle for the hem of her skirt. Now if you remember, the center front on her body is already here. You can see it on her underwear from the croquis itself. So again, we want the center front from the body, not the plumb line. And we could take that center front and just start extending it all the way down to the hem. And what we'll do is let's darken it in so it's easier for you to see. And I don't want to get as distracted by this plumb line, so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and start to erase her plumb line, so it never confuses me on where's center front. So if you look at your handout for the Drape Flow page 2, the very first dress here, she's doing the same thing. So her weight is on this, her left foot, and her hem is popping to the left side. And here you can see where the hem and the skirt, side seam of the skirt is really close to this leg and far away from this leg. So what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of guesstimate about how far away it is here, so we know what to aim for as we come back up to the waistband. So making sure it's always an outside curve. It's starting to touch her right here at the full hip, connecting to the waistband, and you're leaving some room inside of here for her to move. Now that we have this distance from here to the center front, we can make the same distance heading outwards. Once you have that new location, again, you're heading back to this waistband and flowing just outside of her hip skin area. So now you can see it's going to be a larger distance here to the left side and a smaller distance here to the right side. So let's go ahead and get our arrows here. So this is popping to the left, popping to the left. Now again, the bottom of the skirt is going to be a curve. And when you do this curve, whatever distance you come upwards here, go upwards the same distance there, and then meet at the hem at the center front. Now that we have everything in place, let's go ahead and darken it in with the number 2 pencil. And then let's show what's going on here with her waist. Now we can see the difference between the two skirts and how this one is popping way off to the side here. Let's go ahead and put a line heading down with an arrowhead. And then we can see the distance from here to here is plus. And on this side, the distance from here to here is minus. So using your number 2 pencil, let's go ahead and finish getting the leg starting from the hem and coming down. Now we can see the difference between the two skirts. The static pose is just hanging straight down. The standing pose, the skirt is popping off to the same side that her hip is popping to. Let's go ahead and come up here and put some Western style pockets in here. What I want to do is, whatever I do on one side, I need to make sure it's the same on the opposite side. So if I come in here and I just guess a basic Western style pocket, so similar to what's on your jeans. When I come over to the other side, I want to make sure that I'm doing the same distance inwards. So I'll take that measurement now, flip it over here. And then I also want to have the same distance down and following the angle of her hips. So using this full hip guideline from the croquis, I'll come up to the bottom of this pocket here. And I can find the location over here because it's parallel with what her hips are doing. And now I can just basically guess the curve heading back up. And I'm noticing like this one I squared it off a little more, this one's a little more rounded, so I kind of need to choose between the two which one I like better. So now we have our two Western style pockets and it's following the angle of her skirt. The next thing you want to do is, if her hand goes in this pocket, the skirt itself should bump out slightly so there's room to get your hand inside of there. So what we would need to do is, below this pocket, for a short distance, we need to erase some of the original skirt. And what you're going to do is, the pocket itself will stick out a little beyond what the skirt is doing, and then connect back to here. So then underneath here we can see that the skin and her underwear is the tightest, closest to the body. And then the skirt itself would be another layer outside of that. And now that we have a pocket, this would be still another layer outside of that as well. And then usually if this was like a Western style skirt or something, they would have a top stitch following the pocket. And whatever distance of top stitch you do here, you'll want to do the same thing here. And just for fun, if you wanted to have a little coin pocket inside of there on one side, again, I would follow the angle of her hips. And I would make this little coin pocket again stick out slightly further than the side of her skirt. And the side of her skirt here is sticking out further than her skin. So now we have a little coin pocket. If you wanted to, at the top here, you could have your rivets. So it's got a nice strong connection. And of course, the options are limitless on what you're going to do with pockets and hem lengths and top stitching and waistbands and belts and all of that stuff. I just want you to know the basics for the static pose, what the hem is doing at the bottom, and any kind of a standing pose as well as the walking pose. You're going to see the hem and the center front are going to move with wherever her hip is popping. Let's move on now to the second model here. What's going on in this picture is the skirt she's wearing is a very full skirt. So even though she has her weight more on this leg here, and you would expect that this hem would be popping more to this side, you'll notice that it's pretty even on both sides. And we'll talk about why it's doing that. Now for this girl, I have a plumb line in here for you. But in the video, it's kind of hard to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it just slightly darker. Now what I want you to do is come up here to where you can see the boat neck out onto her shoulders. And notice where the tops of it is, and put a dot right here and here. Now this lets us know that if we compare that line, and let's draw this in very lightly. So if you compare this to the plumb line, you can see that her shoulders are popping up here to the left side. As we get down to the waist area, if you put a dot right at the plumb line, right at the waist, and you're looking at the plumb line versus the waist, you're seeing that the waist looks pretty much straight across. So the garment itself is starting to tilt down, and then as we come all the way down to her knees, come in here and find the basics of each kneecap, and noticing that one is a little bit lower than the other. And we can come in here and connect those together. And here we can see that her knees are popping to the right side. So her knees are popping to the right side. There's a little more weight on this foot, a little bit less weight on that foot. Now the hem of the dress seems like it's almost popping back to the left side here. The reason being is this hem here is connected all the way back to the waist, which is connected all the way back to this shoulder. So this is a one-piece dress. So as she lifted that shoulder up, the hem of the dress kind of moved with her as well. Another reason why there's so much volume from here to here is because the dress itself has a lot of volume. If you come in closely here, you can see that there's a pleat coming down. Basically, these are trumpets in the dress coming downwards. There's one more out here at the back. And what the dress is doing is a shape like this, where it's going back and around, and then it keeps going. So then there's a pleat here, 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 and here. So the pleats are going up the dress, and then you can see the folds down at the hem. So that's what's going on here. So just take your best guess on what's happening here with the hem. And at this point, just ignore her hand on hip. So we can start to see there's a lot of volume going on in the hem of this skirt. If you also notice, it's still curving downwards. So again, everything down from the waist is curving down. Then this waist seam right here is basically straight across, because it's starting to kind of favor her hip popping to this side, but it's also still part of the shoulder pulling the dress upwards. And then somewhere up in this area, there would be a seam for her sleeve. So just connect a little seam going back. And then you have each sleeve, boat neck. And let's go ahead and put her neck in here. Come down here where her legs are coming out, and let's go ahead and just get the basics of what's going on. And this shoe here is a slight 3/4 view. So if you look at it, the ankle turns into the bottom of the foot, turns into where the toes are. And the top of the foot skin has a slight outside curve to it here. And then you'll see that the shoe will come in, and she has some straps on here, but we'll just ignore all the different straps and just kind of draw the basics of what's going on. And the heel itself will just go straight down with gravity. Let's take a look at these last two girls here. Basically, these are two walking poses, and they're side by side just like this. So the first girl has her weight on her right leg, the second girl has her weight on her left leg. Now for this girl here, we can see that her weight is here on her front leg and her hips are popping to the right side. So the waistband and the hem of the skirt are also popping to this side. Now the top of the skirt is curving downwards because it's down below the waist. The skirt would be out to about here. And the inside, if you were to guess, you're heading down, so it would be tight against her leg, somewhere in that area. Now if this is the angle of her waist and her knees, the angle of the hem is doing the same thing in general. But what's happening here is because this leg is coming forward, it's causing the hem to go up and around her leg. So it's curving upwards with her leg here, and it'll be curving downwards with her leg going behind. But for the most part, it's still traveling at an angle going towards her right side. And then the skirt inside of here you can see is kind of doing the same thing. So again, her waist and her hips are now going to the left side, and this has a slight curve downward. So the hem is going to do the same kind of an angle, but again this leg here is popping forward because she's walking, so the hem of the skirt has a slight upward curve and then a downward curve for the foot behind. And then the skirt would be inside of here. Let's finish by analyzing what's going on here with her jacket. Now obviously the jacket is open, and as she's walking it's going to be moving back and forth and flowing in the wind. In this instance, this hip and leg came forward, and the jacket itself is flopping open and moving back behind her. So if you come in here and you get this edge of the jacket and it's flowing down just in front of her hip, this would be the fold in the jacket. And the outside edge of the jacket is actually over here. So at some point, this outside edge of the jacket also becomes the hem curving back and going behind her leg, and this fold right here just disappears. So eventually that line will just stop in the middle of nowhere. Then we see there's a little bit of her shoulder left over, so there's like a seam for the sleeve, and then the sleeve is going behind the jacket. Let's take a look here at this side. So this side of the jacket is snug up against her body because as she's moving forward, the wind is keeping it pressed towards her. So we can see here is the center front of the jacket and the neckline, and then it's flowing here off to the bottom hem. Over here we can see the seam from her sleeve and the side of the jacket coming down and her sleeve coming towards us. And now I can see from this side that this looks more like a drop shoulder seam. So over here, the seam on her jacket would be something like this. Now you can also see there's kind of a secondary little crease here. And basically what's happening was similar to what's the folds going on her dress here, there's something going on down here. So how I would draw this was, if this is the crease heading back upwards, I would have, here's the outside edge of the jacket traveling down, this is coming up, here's that crease, and then going back down. And then we would have just like a little loop here to just show, hey, it's just ending as it flows back up towards her body. Let's also analyze the end of her sleeve here. Now this hand is swinging forward because if this knee is coming forward, this hand is coming forward. This knee is going back, that hand was going back. So what's going on here is we can see the cuff behind her hand, and then this is curving upwards here. So now you have a sense of, you can look into her sleeve. So her hand here is going into the sleeve, and we can see into the cuff because her hand is coming forward. And let's analyze one more thing. So remember that the hem of her skirt was going down because this is following with her hips. Well, here her top is going to be following with her shoulders. So if you just basically came in and found what you think would be like a high point on a shoulder here and here, connected those with a light line, just to get a sense of what the shoulders are doing, that's what the hem is doing on her top. So we can come down here to what would be about the middle center area of her top, and making sure that we're parallel with the shoulders, and then knowing that this is above the waist, so it's going to curve up. So up from the waist, curve up. So that was curving upwards. And then here's just the difference between her jacket, which is going up behind her neck, and then this is the shirt right here. So let's go ahead and do something just to separate the shirt from the jacket. Let's go ahead and just shade the shirt as if though it was a different color. Now if we analyze down here at the bottom of the hem of her jacket, so completely ignore the skirt and look at the jacket. And if you look for the lowest part here and the lowest part here and match those together, you'll notice, compared to the plumb line, that this is popping to her left side. So the bottom hem of her jacket is connected all the way back up to the shoulders. So the shoulders are popping to the left, the hem of her top is popping to the left, and the jacket itself is popping to the left. Then when we moved into the waist area, we have the waistband is popping to the right, the hem of the skirt is popping to the right. Let's come in here now to the last girl and analyze her top. Now for this girl, we can't quite see what's going on with her full hips and her knees because they're hiding below. But we know that her weight is here on her left foot, and the hem is popping to the left side, and her waistband is popping here to the left side. So we know that basically the full hip is doing the same. Come in here to the waistband and get the highest point here and here, and connect those with a ruler. And that gives us a sense of the angle that it's traveling. So pretty much we can guess as we come down to the hem that the hem would be doing the same angle. So I came down to touch the bottom part of the hem, this outside edge here, and then you can pretty much guess also that her knees are doing the same thing. When we look at her top will be doing the opposite. So let's go ahead and find a high point on both of her shoulders by, first of all, we'll trace this off. And then here at the hem, make sure you're slightly curving upwards. Now what we can do is we can find a high point here on this shoulder and this shoulder. Connect those high points. And we have a good sense of her shoulder popping to the right. And then using that line, you can come down here to the hem of her shirt. And you can see the hem of the shirt is following that also. Now, something that you would want to know if you're drawing this, basically this here at the shoulder, here and here, are just seams. And down here, this is where the shirt is traveling around the side of her body. But for the armhole right here and the neckline, this is an open area. So for instance, her shoulder would come up and her arm would travel into the shirt here. And this is traveling into here. So these are openings from here to here. Usually for an opening, you would have to put something in here, like a top stitch or binding or something. If you don't put anything in here, then this will be a fully lined piece and they'll finish all the raw edges hiding in between the two layers. But just for practice, go ahead and come over here and we'll put some binding along this armhole. And then we'll do the same. We'll put some binding for her neckline. And now that we did this, they can make this garment with just a single layer, and these bindings here would finish all the raw edges. But you don't put any binding at the shoulder because this is traveling up and around behind her body, and you don't put any binding on the side seams because this would be traveling from the front, past her side, and back around to the back. Let's analyze down here what's going on with the hem. So remember, we found the angle for the waist, the hem of her skirt underneath, her knees are probably the same angle. Well, this is pretty much the same angle as well for the hem of the dress. So come down to what you think is the lowest point of the dress here in front of her walking foot, and we'll draw a guideline, making sure that it's parallel with the hem of her skirt. And this will give you a sense of what you're aiming for. Now, something else that's happening is remember that the hem of the skirt would bump upwards for the walking foot here. Well, down here, the same thing is happening where the skirt is hitting her walking foot. This is the foot with her weight on it. And then there's a wrinkle going back up following where her knee is. So if I were to guess her knee is in this area, there's a crease heading back towards that knee area. So this is for this sheer overlay. There's the solid skirt underneath and this sheer layer is on top of the skirt. The leg that is going behind, this hem here is coming up short. The same as on the walking foot, you would have one shoe is lower, the next one's higher. So if you were to look at like a strap on a shoe, this one's lower, this one's higher. You have that the front of the hem is lower, the back of the hem is higher because this foot back here is pushing it back away. Then also we're getting another fold right here, and this is coming off of her hip. So if I were to come into about here, I could have the fold come up and start to disappear. But if you notice on yours, there's still one more thing going on. As she's walking and the wind is blowing, this last little hem here is flowing back into space along with her hip popping. So this is popping back into space, her hips are popping, the top of her hem of her skirt, it's all popping back here to the left side. And we're seeing just a little bit of this skirt also doing the same thing. So for this fold here, what I would do is I would come up and just slightly turn inside like that. And then basically you're saying, hey, there's like a shadow here. And this trumpet is in front, this little fold here is in back. And then here I've come up and I put a little curve here, and we're saying basically there's a shadow all inside there, to show that this leg here is pushing the hem towards us and everything else is flowing back with the wind. And there's also a secondary kind of a wrinkle here. If we were to go back and erase where we were guessing what the underskirt was doing, there would be kind of a second little crease going on right here. And what's happening with that is the leg that's curving back under right here would be here somewhere, curving back under and heading for her knee, which is almost behind this knee here. So that would be her leg is heading back, and then we have a little crease going on right here. So then I'll come back up here and I'll just darken. Here's the waist. And that was her hips. And basically it's a two-layer dress. It's got the solid skirt underneath, the sheer layer on top. This was a skirt underneath with a jacket on top. The jacket's unbuttoned. This side here is flowing open. This side here got pressed against her skin. These two tops are moving in the direction that the shoulders are moving. These two skirts are moving in the direction that the hips are moving. Okay, so inside of here, we're going to do one more skirt together. And let's do this using our standing pose. I want you to come in here and have it evenly split up so there's the same amount of room on both sides, and have her right in the middle. And what we need is we need to see her waist, and we need to see as much as we can down here with her ankles. So go ahead and find a location for her and then see where that plumb line is. And then come over here and make sure you square up a plumb line with your paper. So here I have mine taped on. Again, we need all the way from the waist down to the lower part of her ankles. And then make it centered so it's evenly spaced in between the dress and the edge of the paper here. Down here at her ankle length, which is 9 1/4 heads down, from this guideline, I want you to do one hem scooping down and go to this hem guideline, remembering that this one's lower and that one's higher. And then moving up here to the waist area, get the top of her, this is the high hip, so the top of her underwear, and then the top of the hip bones. So we're doing kind of a wide waistband. And then find the center front here from the model below, making sure you're getting the center front and not the plumb line. And then following down the center front, put a dot here, and out here where the high hip is touching the side of her body, and then a dot here below the high hip at center front. And let's go ahead and V back out to that. And then we'll connect the sides of the waistband, making sure that where it is here at the high hip, you're just going straight up and straight up. And the top of the waistband will slightly curve upwards. So now we have like a contour waistband that's going to be nice and stable for a big flowy dress. So for the rest of the skirt, what we're going to do is it's going to be really flowy off of her body. And where the peak is for the highest part of her hip, the widest part of her full hip here, the skirt will come out to that and then start dropping down with gravity. And then let's get the same thing over here. the whitest part is starting to drop down with gravity. So this one's aiming down towards the middle of her foot, and this one's aiming down for outside off of her foot. Now what's going to happen, since this calf is popping out, the skirt itself is going to want to flow outwards as well. So this will head back towards her knee area. So part of the skirt is going to come and flow down into the leg, and this part here is going to be pointing back towards where the knee came from. Down here where we have the two curves of the hem, what we want to do is we want to draw wrinkles going back up into the body. And you always go from wide to narrow as you travel up. So if you see the bell shape from here, this is going from wide to narrow, wide to narrow. And the same thing with this one. It's wide here, it's going to narrow up in here. And then we have the curve of this hem is traveling this way, so put an arrowhead on that. The curve of this hem is traveling this way, and it's flowing with the angle of the legs and the knees and the hips. Now one last thing, what would happen is another part of the skirt would pop out even more, especially if the skirt had a lot of volume at the bottom. So what you need to do is stair step upwards one more time and get this to pop and curve outwards, and this will also connect back up to her highest point on her hip. So now you can see we have a nice solid waistband that's got the little cut in there, and the rest of this is just a big flowy skirt. To start to darken this in now, what we'll do is let's go ahead and get this part of the skirt that flowed off of her hip and is dipping in her knee, and then down in here make it stop, and this will come out from behind that and head down to the hem. And this is all right around here in her knee area. Then this part of the hem here, which was starting to taper in, once we get somewhere above the knee area, let's go ahead and curve it towards center front and do the opposite here. So this hem would be going up. Since this one was lower, this one's higher, make this lower, make this higher, and this will curve in towards center front. Then the outside edge of this hem is heading back up towards her full hip, and we also want to make it stop somewhere above these guys, and then this skirt here will be the actual final outside edge. So then we can finish by getting the bottom hem here, here, and here. And then what's happening in between these two is you want to stair step up a little bit here and here, and you want to do the opposite. If this is curving down, here you're curving up. And now we know that in this area, this is all shaded because that's curving away from us. And then here's a second layer that's also curving away. So come down here and we'll get the ankles and as much of the shoe as you can get. Back up in here, let's do a little more detail work on the waistband. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw in her waist here from her skin, just to get a sense of how wide this waistband is. Now if you were a pattern maker and you had a center front seam right here, you could use this to your advantage to not have the straight edges here on the sides. So what you could do is what's called a contour waistband, so you can actually make the waistband more fitted towards her body. So in that instance, you can get rid of these corners sticking out right here. But it's still really important that the waistband sticks out further than her skin. So again, if this is her natural waist and her skin here, you still need to come out beyond her skin and get this waistband. And something else that could be fun is if we did like a little chevron in here. So if this was cut on the bias and it was stripes. So let's start the first one just right here. You could do a right angle and then do the other side here. So this is 45 degrees at the right angle. And then let's turn this into a stripe. So here would be one stripe and this would be the other. So then you would determine how far away would the next stripe be, and it would just follow right along with that. And then there would probably be something right inside here. And here's the bottom of our contour waistband. And again, there's a center front seam, so you would make that dark, finish the top edge here. And I'm noticing my stripe here matched perfectly with her waistline, so I just want to take a second to just change that slightly so it's not confusing that this is a stripe, that's her waist. And they'll get the idea. Basically, I'd have to change this one too. But the pattern makers would understand that you want it cut on the bias and to chevron here at center front. Now you can see we have 3 different skirts and 2 different poses. And this one here is where the feet are coming down in front of the skirt. This one we're just showing her hips are popping to one side, and here's the stagnant pose. Now that you've completed this video, scan this page and submit this to me as part of your grade, along with this page as well.